From the Soapbox is the official podcast for the American Animal Hospital Association's digital newsroom, Trends. Here, we take inspiration from the familiar soap notes, but instead of looking at the condition of a patient, we're diagnosing and discussing the state of the veterinary industry. We'll chat about the challenges, trends, and innovations shaping the veterinary world with voices from across the community. I'm your host, Dr. Emily Singler. Thanks for listening. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of From the Soapbox. My guest today is Dr. Sonja Olson, a veterinarian, author, speaker, wellness educator, and just all-around amazing human. She was inspired by her own experiences with burnout as an emergency veterinarian to delve into the study of well-being of veterinary professionals and to create strategies to help them thrive via workshops, presentations, and coaching. In 2022, she wrote her first book, Creating Wellbeing and Building Resilience in the Veterinary Profession, A Call to Life, and now she's working on a second book on the same topic. I'm excited for everyone to hear this episode because talking with Sonja is like getting a big, warm hug. We talked about empathic strain, moral injury, and how many of us are so entrenched in our identity as veterinary professionals. She also talks about what resilience means to her and how it's not a substitute for systemic change within our profession. So if you want to learn more about stress, trauma, personal responsibility, and imperfection in a way that's gentle and evidence-based, this episode is for you. Without further ado, getting her time to talk from the soapbox, Dr. Sonja Olson. Dr. Sonja Olson, thank you so much for being with us today. I'm really excited to have you here and have so many other people get to know you and get to know what a joy it is to just learn from you and learn more about the amazing things you're doing. So
Thank you, my dear Emily. I am glad to be with you today. So, looking forward to our conversation.
well, I want to start out just by kind of giving everyone a little background on who you are and sort of how you got to where you are right now, because it's, I think, really an amazing journey that you've had. So, just in however you would like to share that, just a little bit about kind of how you got from being a veterinarian, or I don't know, maybe it starts even further back than that, kind of like your journey from clinical practice to where you are now, focusing on well-being within the veterinary space, and also author, speaker, subject matter expert. I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah, no, and it's interesting when you frame it that way, Emily. What came to my mind, it's something that we sometimes forget that there are other parts of our lives where we were pulling on strengths or things that we found a lot of fulfillment or purpose or meaning in. And when I just was hearing you say this, it helped me remember that I was actually an advocate, a peer supporter, starting all the way in high school around women's reproductive health issues, about gay rights, about many things that were sort of like, what? You're going to talk about that? So when I look back, there were times that I was part of less popular, more challenging conversations, but that conversations that needed to be had for the benefit of holistic wellness. That continued into college. And when I look back at that I was part of a founding group of women that had a really robust peer support space for people with mental health concerns, for suicide prevention, and around reproductive health. So again, it was just a space that I think I was practicing, my voice and taking a stand for things. I think veterinary school, as most folks who go through big training programs like that, realize that it's all consuming. So there wasn't
Yes, it
a
is.
whole lot of additional time around that. And I think that is also true during the first several years of my, career as an intern and going into emergency medicine. My focus was wholeheartedly on being really a fantastic quality veterinarian, quality teammate, learning, growing. That was the focus. So I think that really was what I expected of myself, and everything else took a backseat, so including life. So I think that's where I think many of our folks that are listening can relate to that experience. And maybe they're still experiencing this where the rest of their life and the parts of themselves that are not veterinary professionals are on the back burner. You do that for enough time, and your worth, your value, your identity becomes so focused on your doing, your veterinary doing, that it can be really hard to untangle. So when the time came for me to recognize that after decades of doing emergency work, yes, along the way, I become more active in teaching and mentoring, which was really filling my heart. It was the clinical work that was really starting to wear me down psychologically, physically. And it was a time where I recognized, okay, I need to do this differently. But oh my gosh, Emily, so hard. My identity was so tethered to being Dr. Sonja Olson, emergency veterinarian, that if I was not that, and if I was not contributing in that way, oh, it's even sad to say, what what good am I in the world? Ah, and I heard colleagues say this, and I'm like, oh my gosh, that hurts my heart.
Yeah, I hear that.
So it was the pivot point. It was a major pivot point. And as I reflect upon it, it was because my body didn't give me a choice. I was gonna keep pushing until my body was like, "And no, this is a bad idea." And it finally took, quite truthfully, my husband having to say to me, "Is this job worth dying for?" For me to just really take a big step back and realize, "Wait, is it? And what about the people who love me and that I love, and the animals that love me and that I love, and all these other aspects of my life? Is this it? Do I sacrifice myself on the altar of vet med? And who gains from that? When it comes right down to it, nobody. Nobody wins
Very
at
true.
that. So it took a big, big hunk of courage, a lot of compassion, and a whole lot of community. And it wasn't insto presto. It took time to work towards it, lots of conversations, processing, and building up strategies of how to shift into next. And that's not something that we should expect ourselves to do by ourselves. No way. So I would love that that is a really good foundation, I think, for our conversation today.
Very important. I think, like you said, as veterinary professionals in so many aspects, we have all these, whether we came in with them or we picked them up along the way, all these perfectionist, sort of all or nothing tendencies where we can be very, very hard on ourselves for not accomplishing XYZ exactly, whether it's learning a new procedure or, meeting a certain production expectation or something totally unrelated to clinical practice. I set out to do it, therefore I should be able to do it because I'm smart and I work hard and, this is what's expected of me. But as you said,
I just where did we go with this failure, quote unquote, failure is not an option sort of mindset? It sounds like something out of a really bad movie, but by my God, we lived it. We have such a historical culture that failure is not an option. Now, to be honest, when we think about failure in medical environments, I do want to be clear that I'm not being flippant about the fact that animal welfare and the lives of the people who love them can be impacted when something goes awry. Yes, let's please do our very best. Let's be ethical. Let's really bring our best selves to the conversation and the work we do. But therein lies exactly what we're talking about again. Are we our best selves when we're pushing it at 150% all the time? I doubt it. I doubt we're really our best selves. I doubt that we are setting ourselves up to make fewer mistakes, to think clearly, to communicate more clearly, and to collaborate with your team. I think you're actually doing the opposite.
I just want to say that knowing everything that I know about you, like learning sort of more about your pre-veterinarian days in life, it does not surprise me at all that you were on the forefront of some of those difficult, challenging conversations, that you were speaking up at a time where it wasn't so widely accepted and sort of part of the mainstream to do so. So again, knowing what I know about you, that doesn't surprise me at all, but still kudos to you. So I wanted to talk about, it's talked about a lot, just the idea that our profession is to some extent experiencing a mental health crisis. And that is, I think all veterinary professionals are at risk, not just veterinarians. And we know it's a complex problem. There are lots of contributing factors. We can't just boil it down to one thing. It's not just all, clients or money or corporatization, or we it's not that simple. Um, and we're definitely not going to be able to talk about all the possible causes, but I do want to try to touch on some of them, ones that I know that you really focus on and speak about. And the first one that I want to touch on is this idea of moral distress or moral injury. Um, so can you talk about sort of what that is, if you have an example, and then potentially some ways to address it, either before it happens or once it happens, or both, and just kind of give us an idea of what that could look like.
Yeah. No, I think the reality is that there's many things that we have learned. Oh, especially really, it's blossomed since I would say 26 between 2016 and 2018 is when I feel like there was a real lifting of awareness. There was language that was coming to us from other caregiving, especially medical environments and professions. We're not the first to experience things such as the compassion fatigue was what first came towards us, which is a bit of a misnomer. Many of us were like, wait a minute, that doesn't resonate with me. My compassion is intact. Well, the reason it doesn't resonate is that it's actually neurobiologically incorrect. So, empathic strain is the new language around what we experience. When we hear that, we're like, oh, oh, yeah. Yeah, now I get that. That makes a lot of sense. My empathy is all over the place, and I am draining that tank on the regular. So, empathic strain is an important one. I
That
think
does
the
make
other
a lot
thing,
of sense.
doesn't it? Right? You're like,
Yeah,
oh, because compassion does not fatigue. There was a lovely paper years ago by Trisha Dowling where she stated compassion is neurologically rejuvenating. And it is. The places of your brain and your body that are called in for compassion and those that are for empathy are different. One of the solutions and strategies to help cope with empathic strain is self compassion and compassion for others. Ta da! So that's its own conversation, but an important one. There's a difference. The other things that we learned more about was, and it's not again a surprise to us, is that veterinary medicine is highly emotional. It's also trauma soaked. It's trauma soaked in that we each individually have our background experiences of trauma and grief that we bring to the conversation. This is so. We are humans doing really challenging work. And we have trauma within the environment, just as other caregiving environments do. What we have come to understand, again, really helpful to have language, is this concept of secondary traumatic stress, vicarious traumatization, where we hear it, we see it, and our body doesn't know the difference. It receives it as if it was our own. So that's very important. We receive it from our environment, we receive it from things that we hear and that we see and we read, yes. Also, we do it to each other, and we even bring it home. We bring it to our friends, we bring it to our partners. And I love the language of Francois Mathieu. She says, we just slime people with what's going on because then we feel better. And then they're sitting there holding the slime from our experience. So it's really being mindful of the fact that there are very helpful strategies, ethical strategies to coping with all those big emotions that we're experiencing and the trauma that we witness and experience so that we don't unduly, unconsciously cause additional harm to others. Right. So secondary traumatic stress, really, really important. And I love that you brought moral injury and moral distress forward because the more that research that is being done on veterinary professionals, this is an important part of what is contributing to our experience of fatigue, our experience uniquely of distress, and of professional burnout. They are separate things, right? And there are many contributors, as you mentioned, very complex, so many different aspects. Your own personality, your own background, your coping strategies or lack thereof, many different things. And the culture what you are working in, what leadership is bringing towards you as expected norms and culture, right? Those things all are going to influence and flavor your experience. Moral injury and distress, though, is something that they're finding for veterinary caregivers because animal welfare is what pulls at our hearts. It's why we got into this business. It's what informs us. It's our North Star. And when we feel that we are unable to do the right thing for the animal, nothing, distresses us faster or more deeply than feeling like we could not do, or we weren't given the opportunity to, or we weren't listened to when we were trying to do something that we felt was in the animal's best interest. That is in cases of euthanasia, that's in cases of finances, that's in the cases of abuse. Those are the 3 really big important buckets. There are more, but those are the 3 really big ones as far as contributors to moral injury and distress. I really want folks to understand that it's a psychological and an emotional experience. It's not a mental health condition. It's not a syndrome. It's simply that it's a state of distress that can exist and compound other things. If not addressed, if not recognized, it can further have comorbidities, if you will, right? We lose sleep. We have a feeling of disconnection from our work. Our meaning in our work becomes harder to hold on to. Just as it is with empathic strain, it's harder to care. It's harder to speak up because we feel a sense of powerlessness and hopelessness. And over time, I think it's really helpful for folks to recognize there's this concept of having a diminished moral sensitivity that can go with this concept of compassion fatigue and empathic strain. So that's just to give folks a little bit of a feeling of like, oh, that's what that is called. That's what we're pointing to. So I think, again, from the social work realm, I love this phrase, name it to tame it. If we are better able to recognize, this is what's here, this is what I'm experiencing, now what?
So I love the idea that you're saying that it's not a syndrome. It's not like a disease or a condition. So would it be fair to say when I'm in a situation that in which I feel moral distress, that is a normal way to feel in a difficult situation?
Heck yes.
That is
Let's
what you would
normalize that.
expect to happen when you're in the situation where your hands are tied, where you can't help the patient in the way that you would like to for whatever reason.
All the reasons, right. The ethical conflict is the other language that's really helpful here because it is an ethical conflict. It goes against our ethical grain. It's our sense of right and wrong. And for us as animal caregivers, our sense of right and wrong is very closely connected to what we think we individually and we collectively think is the right thing to do for animals. Now, here's the other thing, though, Emily, is that also what we think here in North America may be different than what it is in another culture, right? And even within the melting pot that is North America, we are going to have people from all sorts of backgrounds, beliefs, socioeconomic strata that are going to come to the conversation with different levels of understanding, awareness, means, beliefs, and even religious experiences. So we're in a very complex landscape of navigating what our beliefs are and being aware that those are my beliefs may not be the same as yours, Emily. We may have some crossover, but there may be places, for example, a really important one is around like quality of life. How we define quality of life for an animal. I find in the veterinary landscape, colleagues might sometimes have some differences around that, depending on the way that they grew up, type of medicine that they practice, right?
Yeah, I feel like I see that a lot over discussions around euthanasia where one veterinary professional might say, express a lot of sadness or disappointment that an owner wanted to euthanize a pet or that a pet were euthanized and feel, oh, we could have done more, we could have done these other things, we failed the pet. And another person might look at that and say, that pet was not going to get those other things. That owner was not capable of providing that level of care. So the pet would have continued to suffer. So they'll be able to look at that and say, okay, that really was the best outcome for that pet because the alternative would have been an unacceptable quality of life in whatever circumstance.
Right. And so here comes that really big, active, dynamic conversation that's occurring, particularly around companion animal, around spectrum of care. We are now having much more robust conversations around language, around mindset, cultural humility, around creative financial, strategies to support contextualized incremental care and creating strategies of training for our up and coming doctors and technicians so that they are more prepared to support those, I think is going to be a huge contributor to decreasing moral distress for us as a profession and for the clients. You better believe they're experiencing moral injury and distress as well. You think they don't want all the means in the world to do what they can do for their animals? Of course they want that. And how much, what the sense of, shame or of guilt or of I'm even my worth, I am a bad person because I don't have the means to do this for my beloved pet. And let's be clear, we can either contribute to the shame and the judgment, or we can help guide somebody through a really, really challenging, scary time in a way that's more compassionate and skillful. That's where we are today. And I think that's a really exciting place for us to look at how do we do it differently? How do we support pet care, animal welfare as family health going forward? It's a one health strategy that you're hearing from all different sectors, quite truthfully, globally. It's coming from Australia, it's coming from UK, Canada, US. Lots of really robust and beautiful conversations around how to do this differently.
Yeah, I'm really excited about that because I'm hearing a lot of these phrases sort of repeatedly now. Between the AHA community care guidelines that we have out, that where we talk a lot about family centered care, and then some of the other guests that we've had recently on the podcast, Dr. Kristen Jankowski with the Open Door Collective. Um, and our conversation about veterinary social work. Dr. Michael Blackwell, he talked a lot about the same thing, not only family centered care, but the idea that veterinary care is just a part of family health care. Really kind of incorporating that in, giving veterinarians and veterinary professionals kind of more a seat at that table. Um, but I also love just your focus that um, combating, preventing, addressing moral injury can be done both at the individual level with, how we choose to exercise compassion toward that client and their pet, and also inward to ourselves with self-compassion in that we are facing a difficult situation in which perhaps there is no one easy answer. But then also at the system level, in terms of sort of rethinking our expectations of ourselves and of our profession, and incorporating more reasonable expectations in terms of meeting the family's needs, as opposed to sort of measuring ourselves against this perhaps unattainable yardstick, yeah, the gold
Which is
standard.
just, when you look at that, it's just bananas. It really, what a source of already of suffering, that might be when you're outside of the tertiary training environments and you're put into the real world of practice and limited resources in the form of equipment, of people, of finances, all sorts of things can change the way that we practice. This is the art of medicine. This is where we get super creative, and by the way, it doesn't have to all be you. It can be done in stages. It can be done with, follow up through technological help around telehealth and utilizing your nursing staff to follow up with clients. It's really pulling in the wealth of knowledge and skills of our entire veterinary team. And I also think, how about we really involve the clients and upskill them, help them understand? So there's just different approaches that I think we're understanding the big opportunity in front of us to do it differently. And I appreciate also that you pointed towards the individual space, because one of the things that I also like to bring forward towards folks is that you can fortify your moral resilience. So, shall we shift into that?
Yes, yes, that was exactly what I wanted to ask you about, and I wanted to just bring in the your book. So we haven't really talked about that yet. So you are a published author. Your book, "Creating Wellbeing and Building Resilience in the Veterinary Profession: A Call to Life," was published by CRC Press a few years ago. Amazing book for anyone who hasn't read it. And I wanted to really touch on the idea of resilience. It's in the title of your book, and it's certainly a word that is used, I'd say, regularly. And sometimes, at least for me, it can feel confusing because, or maybe conflicting. Um, there have been voices out there that have suggested that, one of the big problems with well-being in veterinary medicine is that we don't have enough resilience, like as individuals, that we don't have enough resilience, or that we haven't tried hard enough to be resilient, or that I've even heard the argument that we need to rethink how we're doing veterinary school interviews and veterinary school admissions, to make sure we're picking people who are more resilient. So we get all of these, really resilient people, whatever those people look like, and then we'll have fewer mental health challenges, fewer, less of a well-being crisis, in our field, kind of to say that it's on the individual, or that there's some kind of deficiency, or that we're not working hard enough, or not, it's our fault, on some level that we are suffering, and the collective we, um, and I'm curious to know, like, that argument has never sat well with me. And
I was just
I'm
saying, I'm really appreciating your articulating what goes into people's minds and the message we're receiving when it's talked about in that way. I was just going to ask you, and how do you feel about the way that's messaged? And I can hear it. You're like, no, you're like, I feel blamed. I feel shamed. Like my suffering is my fault because of my personality characteristics, my lack of preparation, my deficiencies in my coping skills. Come on now. That's not fair.
Yeah,
And
and not to say that, like, I and all the rest of us don't also have some personal responsibility to do what we can to sort of fortify ourselves, but it feels to me that when we talk, or when we emphasize resilience in that way, at least the way some people have talked about it, that it was almost presented as sort of the solution. Um, and I'm curious to know what you think.
I'm resonating with all the things that you're bringing forward because that's one of the reasons, not just in veterinary medicine, it's in a lot of different professional environments where this idea of resilience is that the onus is upon the worker to be tough enough to take the stressors of whatever the environment dishes out. I call BS. I call BS on it. I think that there is joint responsibility. And of course, shocking, it's a more complex conversation. It has to be bottom up and top down. There has to be a culture of accountability from ourselves and, quite truthfully, from the people that create the environments that we work within. That's culture creation. That is the creation of an environment where we care about the people that are working in these environments. Our holistic health and well being matters so that we can bring best quality care to the animals and the clients that we serve. That is good business for everyone. And in it, guess what? There is less distress. A system that is multi layered and nimble, where folks are paying attention to the realities of the stressors and meeting them with a conversation of, let's hear from everyone about strategies to meet it. This is creating resiliency. This is collective intelligence. It's in nature. They talk a lot about biomimicry these days in a lot of spaces. This is biomimicry. This is where we can learn a lot from Mother Nature. Resilience is being bendy and coming back towards balance, a sense of homeostasis when things really push and pull you. So, resilience is not being tough and coated with Teflon, and I'm not going to feel being strong enough to muscle through it. Oh my God, please, please, we do not need that message anymore in veterinary medicine. It has done great harm, including to myself, that I needed to be stronger. I wasn't enough, and that I was failing. And that in that, how dare I think about doing something else? Oh, it kept me in place longer than I should have stayed, to my detriment. And I know that's true for many, many other caregiving professionals. And again, it's not just vet med, but boy, do we do it in vet med. So the conversation needs to shift, right? And we know that it's a conversation around, as you say, I love there's some steps that we can think about, for example, around moral resilience. If we think about that, because we were talking about how important that space is and how tender and fraught it can be, right? With the components that can really hit us. So first and foremost, like you said, it's self-reflection, for yourself, really defining and refining your own personal moral compass and understanding your personal code of ethics. Nobody can do that for you. And it takes some time to really reflect upon what is it that matters to me? What are my beliefs? And why do I have those beliefs? That's a space of real reflection and introspection. I don't know that most people take the time to do until something really hits them. And maybe somebody asks them the question, what was it? What value or values felt conflicted here that's causing you such distress? So really taking a real good look at that. Working on self-awareness, nobody can do that for you. That's part of emotional intelligence, right? Is really understanding who am I, when, and who do I want to be. That space right there is so ripe for us to develop our own strategies because we get a sense of who am I? Who do I want to be? What do I already know? What are my strengths, my wisdom? And what do I find myself still stumbling over or finding myself lacking knowledge around or skills or even community support? Doesn't have to be all by yourself. So, really getting a look at what do I know to do and what am I finding myself falling flat on or finding myself more repeatedly distressed by something. Boundaries or something. I hear from all of us throughout vet med. Boundaries are a really great example of this. Nobody can do that work for you. You have to figure out what your non negotiables are and where you can be bendy. So that's a really great example of self awareness. I also love that's another part of emotional intelligence the art of learning to self regulate. This is self mastery. This is juicy.
Tell me
Just
more. Tell me
I know,
more.
it's a juicy one, right? We're like, "Ooh, self-mastery." Well, the reason your ears perked up is that, by the way, mastery is one of the values that most veterinary professionals hold in high regard. We really love being proficient, competent, and capable. We love that. We're also very curious, and I think that's a good combination for what we do, and we can use those strengths to then reflect upon having greater capacities and capability because we're designing our responses rather than our reactions. So again, it's fortifying your own individual toolbox of strategies and go to moments of stress are going to happen inside and outside of work. And how are you meeting those moments? What's your relationship to stress and to stressors? And with the way that you have emotional dysregulation. What do you do with that? How are you working through it? So you again, should we do it by ourselves? Nope. No, you should not. This is again where we call in. We do some of the work ourselves and we get smart and strategic about, hey, this is what I'm going through. I could really use peer support. I could really use the help of a mentor, of a trusted friend or family member, and if need be, a coach or a therapist. Yay. Call in resources when you find yourself needing to talk it out, needing to process, maybe look at things in a different way. We can get really stuck in a particular perspective sometimes, and it can be helpful to have somebody just to be with us and hear us. Sometimes just even talking it out helps us shift. So I love the idea of owning you are not a victim of your life or of your circumstances. You have so much wisdom and capability and strength, and we can grow it. And you don't have to be perfect. You do not have to be perfect, and you do not have to be strong all the time. It is okay. It is okay to feel messy. and to feel like you screwed up. Welcome to being human, kids.
AhaCon 2025 is more than just continuing education. It's your chance to take your career to the next level. Earn race approved CE credits, engage with industry leading experts, and gain fresh perspectives to bring back to your practice. Hear from powerhouse speakers, plus enjoy unique experiences like live pet portraits, charm bracelets, professional headshots, resume reviews, and much more. September 11th through 13th in downtown Chicago on the Magnificent Mile. Don't miss this transformative event. Learn more at c.aha.org. That's the letter c.aha.org. Looking for the latest veterinary news? Stay ahead of the curve with stories from the American Animal Hospital Association's digital, award winning newsroom, Trends. We're bringing you fresh stories every day, covering everything from the cutting edge clinical insights to helpful practice management tips. And it's not just articles. Watch videos, check out interactive charts, and learn more about the people shaping our industry. As an AHA member, you also unlock exclusive members only content designed to help you and your team thrive. Visit aha.org/trends today and sign up for Trendsetter, our newsletter where all of our stories are delivered to your inbox twice a week.
I love the idea that you bring up of like bringing another person or a group or whatever you need into that space because I can definitely think of times where I will speak out loud what is my reality, which is, my truth to me because it's my experience of the world. And I'll say it out loud. And another person will be like, whoa, why do you think that? Or why are you responding this way? Because you don't need to, or, I don't think anyone thinks that about you, or, whatever the situation is. It's amazing how much clarity can come from getting some external feedback from someone you trust.
Yeah, and also when we're talking about building community and strategies and that it's not just upon us, something that has been done in human medicine environments for decades, kids, decades, having ethical discussion groups, having the language to be able to notice, articulate, and discuss when ethical challenges and conflict occur. And like morbidity and mortality rounds, we work our way through it. This is how we build moral resilience as teams and as a profession. We create open discussion around what happened, very much like you would do a debriefing, right? If a critical incident occurred, something really challenging happened in the clinical environment, what happened? What are the facts? What did we learn? How would we maybe want to do it differently in the future, right? Is there something that we notice? How do we feel about it? Woo! We don't usually talk about that, but it's important to say, this is what's here. And in it, it gives us the chance to then consider, are we doing everything we can to mitigate the likelihood of this happening again for animals, for the client, and for our team? It's a great way of us approaching things that occur on the regular and noticing and normalizing the conversation that they do happen and that we are meeting the moments. Sometimes it gets messy, and those messy moments are good opportunities for us to do morbidity, mortality on the moment.
And is that something that you would recommend, like, if it were a case that maybe only a few people in the practice were a part of? Is that something you would recommend, like, opening up to the whole team or kind of keeping it within that group of people? Or is it really case by case? Or how have you seen it
I think that's a great
implemented?
question. I think it depends on the case. I think it depends on the team. And one of the things you and I have talked a lot about, and I know is super important to AHA as well, is around psychological safety. That must be present in order for this to be helpful and not harmful. So then that brings in, what level of trust do I have with my team? Do I feel safe to discuss these things with these people? Is it something that we discuss as a collective because it's our collective values that we are going to be a space that believes in doing the best care, and we're going to take care of each other as we do it? right? So to me, that's a very, very important part of this. And I think that if psychological safety is not present, it is unlikely that having ethical rounds will be helpful. Instead, it will be a blame, shame, failure conversation that won't feel good for anybody.
Yeah. Yeah. I could definitely see how that could be a problem. And I did want to talk like kind of about psychological safety because, I feel like we have these kind of buzzwords, these kind of terms that get kind of I don't want to say thrown around a lot because they're important, but we're talking about them a lot more, and I feel like psychological safety is another one of those that we're seeing a lot more being spoken about it, being written about it, that kind of thing. Like, I guess I'm curious as to what your impression is in terms of is that really correlating to it being put into practice more regularly? Like, are we taking that message to heart? Are we, like, implementing it in practices, or is it mainly something that we're more kind of, like, theoretical about still and just sort of writing about and talking about, like, "Oh, it would be a great thing to have this psychological safety." Like, are you working with teams? Are you hearing feedback from individuals and groups to see how or if this is being implemented?
It's such a rich question. And I think that what's true is that we are still calling them the unicorn practices because they are rare, where they are embracing what we have come to understand. And it's not easy to change culture. It takes consistency, it takes intention, and repetition, 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 and examination, and being willing to look at hard truths. Nobody loves to look at when they have caused harm or individually or collectively, or when we're doing things in a shabby way. Hello, perfectionists. We do not like looking at this. So it can be challenging for us as a collective. We have to recognize that we've been doing things the way we've been doing them for quite a long time. It's going to take these things, these real clear, valuable benefits to having these spaces of challenge, of learning, of growth, of compassion. Those things, once we collectively embrace the value of that for us as a team, as a veterinary profession, I do feel like more strategies will be just woven into the tapestry of our doing in the veterinary environments. But Emily, I wish I could say that the humans that do the work in veterinary medicine are as valued as they should be, but to date, I don't know that they are. I still feel like that's the bigger conversation that we're up against for ourselves, seeing our own worth, seeing the worth in each other, and having leadership that really believes in the value of the humans that are doing the work. That has to be in place. Wonderful, wonderful vet-centric resources like what the vet visionaries created through AHA. Really valuable. That was a rich document of so many different resources and strategies, questions to have. Those types of resources exist now in the US, in UK, Canada, Australia, New Zealand. So it's a matter then of teams having the courage and the patience to grab hold of those and start practicing. It's not going to be overnight. You have to start where you are. And they are out there. I love that there are certain, of our teammates out there in this wellness sphere of people that are bubbling up and doing beautiful things that are talking about unicorn experiences and environments. So we are recognizing what makes them so. That's awesome. When we can say, this is what really helps when it feels and looks like this. Cool. We want more of those. But it's helpful that we have some templates to say, it's possible. And these are the benefits, these are the repercussions when it goes really well.
Yeah, and not the least of which is, retention and hiring and all of those things that a lot of us are still struggling with.
Oh, the KPIs, right? The things that they talk about, wanting, for profitability and healthy businesses. Yes, good. That benefits everyone. It really does. When we are healthier, happier, more engaged versions of ourselves in all the roles in the vet hospital, not just the caregivers, but the leaders, the front desk staff, when everybody is engaged, it's a more cohesive, space. It's a more fulfilling space. We're more resilient, Emily, because we're a team on a ship, and the seas sometimes get rough. But if we pull together as a team and we've been practicing, we're going to meet the storm. It's when it goes complete chaos and everybody's running all over the deck and nobody knows who's responsible for what, that things feel really terrible. And I feel like we're learning. We're learning how to work more cohesively as a team, how to trust one another, and it's gonna take practice.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's definitely I see that being like kind of a running theme through several of the things that we've talked about today. Like these things do not happen overnight. They take a lot of patience, a lot of consistency, a lot of practice, like you said, a lot of courage to be willing to be introspective and work together and break down whatever barriers are there to make the change.
And why is it worth it? That's the other piece that must be brought right into the forefront for folks that aren't getting it yet, where consciousness has not risen, really bringing forward. And there's some fantastic papers and conversations that are coming forward about why it does matter, the financial impacts, the mental health impacts. And when it comes to looking at the future of veterinary medicine, if veterinarians are going to be an active part of animal care, we must change what we historically have done and challenge status quo. The clients are shifting their allegiances to places that they feel seen and heard and supported. Hello, Chewy, who's doing an amazing job of customer service. We have experiences like that all over the place. And so, again, the responsibility is upon us as a veterinary community to challenge the way things have been done historically and look at what does better look like.
Very true. Very true. And that could be different for each practice.
Right. I'm not saying a one size fits all, but I think we can learn from each other. That's the other piece that it gets me very excited is I do feel like there's more collaborative conversations than competitive conversations these days. Not sure of all the reasons why. I have a sneaking suspicion that more women in the profession have something to do with it, that there might be a bit more collaboration than competition. Just saying. I do feel like it's also the sign of the times that it's necessary.
Um, and then just kind of going off on a little bit of a different tangent topic, but still related. Because we've been talking, kind of more about like systems level stuff, but just kind of at the individual level, we hear a lot of people talk about burnout. Um, and I have to leave clinical practice because I'm burned out. It's a very common complaint, I guess. Not to diminish its realness because having experienced what I would call burnout myself, I think it's very real. And I'm sure you could tie it back into all of the things that we've already talked about. Um, but I have also heard you talk about sort of a related term, bore out. And I'd
Mhm.
love to kind of hear more about that. Are there times where we think we're burned out and we're actually bored out?
Yeah.
Or how do we kind of suss that out?
Yeah. So, and this is a fun thing to just, wrap our conversation up on because we're learning again to be more granular about our language and to say, well, what is this really? Is this burnout or what am I experiencing here? Well, sometimes what we're experiencing is just genuine fatigue, like real fatigue. And we're calling it burnout because we don't know what else to call it. Same thing when some of you ask somebody, how are you feeling? I'm stressed. What does that even mean? I mean, there's so many layers to that could actually point to. I think we've been doing the same thing with this big term of burnout. I'm so burnt out. What does that even mean? Are you disengaged? Do you feel like your values and your voice don't matter or are a mismatch in the environment that you're in? Are you in a toxic practice environment? Are you in a place where your boundaries are not being met, and maybe you don't even know you have boundaries or that you need to speak them and put time into the rest of yourself and your life, and you're letting your work life drive everything around you. So burnout can come up in when we talk about it, let's be clear also, we're talking about professional burnout. There's lots of different places and spaces where burnout can be true. So, for example, if you are burning out because you are caring for an elder family member with dementia or Alzheimer's or another health concern or a child with special needs, you think those folks get burnt out? 100%. 100%. And you think you can turn off that tap when you go into another environment like work? Nope. Nope, you cannot. So that bucket is depleted. You think you're going to go back into this other environment that's going to draw upon your resources. Sometimes folks find it very fortifying because they feel a sense of capacity and capability that really feeds their heart and their energy. I can testify to that. I felt more capable and competent as my work version of Sonia than I did in the rest of my personal life for a good piece of my younger life. I recognize that now that I was actually overworking because that was a coping strategy for me. I now recognize many of my veterinary professional friends who are doing much the same because the work on ourselves is hard. And we slip into the space of, I feel really smart and capable and seen over here. So when we're talking about professional burnout versus bore out, what we're pointing to is I mentioned a little bit ago how we are curious. We are really people who value learning and growing as part of who we are. We feel the most engaged when we are feeling stretched. Well, that's true of veterinary professionals, but actually it's true of most humans that there is an optimal energy state where there is a state of what we call eustress, EU, good stress, that's pushing us to feel challenged, alive. I don't quite know. I'm curious. That can be the sweet spot. Is it awkward and uncomfortable because you don't know yet? Yep, it sure is. It sure is. And then the imposter syndrome and the whole conversation around, conscious change and all of the things that come with that bubble up. What is true is that with bore out, there's actually a kinetic energy to it as well, which I think is really interesting for us as scientists to acknowledge. When we are bored, when we are frustrated, we are not in a space of feeling like we are being intellectually challenged with whatever we are doing. We go into an inertia and a languishing state. And it can feel, I can remember this feeling, heavier and harder to get up and out of what feels like a morass. It feels sticky and hard to get moving again. And what is the trick? Well, the trick is recognizing, oh, that's what's happening. And maybe what I need to do is to find in my environment supportive mentors, leaders, colleagues, where we can talk about, is it my role? Are there other responsibilities, other tasks, other skills? Are there other teams inside or outside of my veterinary practice that I want to be involved with and collaborate with? So it doesn't mean you have to leave your job or your team. It may be that you need new skills, strategies, relationships. All of this is part of a whole bucket of conversation that I learned a lot about this last year called job crafting. Great assessments out there. If you are thinking, whoa, this is interesting, and I might have some more curiosity about this, you may be in a space of being ready for a coach. There are so many amazing veterinary coaches out there now, veterinary professionals who have done additional certifications in coaching to help folks who are maybe working through a professional pivot. There are resources galore on our VMA and our AVMA websites. I know AHA has additional resources. So if you're in a space where you're like, yeah, whoa, okay, that resonates with me. I'm feeling kind of bogged down and disengaged. Well, maybe you're experiencing bore out and you're ready for a challenge. Yeah. So I just love having people kind of get a little more granular, a little bit more curious about what they mean when they say burnout as an umbrella term.
That's such a good way to look at it because it could mean so many different things to different people. And like you said, the answer is not always quit your job.
Nope.
Sometimes it might be.
It might be, but
Sometimes it
it
might
might
be.
also be that you're
But
just bored.
yeah. Yeah.
You love your people. You love your practice, but you've been doing the same old, and you're like, "Challenge me. I'm ready for the next. Put me in, coach." It's that experience that we felt as younger professionals when everything was fresh and new and invigorating. And there's a period of time where maybe it's all right for you to be in a little bit less involvement and invigoration from work because maybe you're raising kids. Right, Emily? Maybe you've got some other challenges in your life, health wise or family wise, that are requiring more energy and attention. So maybe it's okay to be kind of on cruise control in a place that you're doing a great job. You know what's expected of you. Cool. That's great. You're being smart and strategic about where you're putting your energy and your time. So it's just noticing, where am I in my seasons of life? And where and how am I allocating my very precious resources of time and energy?
Yeah, I love that because I think, kind of going back to all these like perfectionist tendencies, how hard we can be on ourselves. I think sometimes we do get in the mindset of judging ourselves of like, oh, I'm not as dedicated as I could be. I'm not doing as much as, Dr. Whoever down the street. And that's okay. I mean, veterinary medicine can mean different things to different people and can mean different things to us at different phases of our lives, depending on what's going on. So I don't know. That's a good reminder for me.
Well, it's something I have to remind myself of every time I even look through my fingers sometimes at LinkedIn, and or these other spaces. And I want to be in a place of celebration and excitement and cheerleading. And then every now and then this little bubble of comparison starts rising up and makes me feel icky. And I think it's really common. And I think again, I just have to catch it and go, okay, walk away now.
Yeah. Yeah. Before you
That's
start
enough.
going, and now look what they're doing. How come they're doing that?
You know what? I don't know anything about what's going on behind the scenes for those individuals. And there's no possible way that I could compare myself to what you're doing, Emily, or what, some of our friends that are also really in the space of wellness champions, right? We're each doing different things in our different way because we have different passions, we have different perspectives to bring to the conversation. And I know that one of your questions that you wanted to wrap this up with is, what am I excited about? That. That is what I'm excited about, is because I'm feeling that these conversations are happening more frequently and the spheres of information and influence and perspective are getting more overlapped, which means more efficient, greater impact for the entire veterinary community. It's happening. It's been moving in that direction, but I do genuinely feel that there's been an upswell in the last 2 years that's been really wonderful, and we're still going. It's great.
That feels so good to get that little bit of optimism. I mean, I always feel that way when I talk to you. I always feel like I get my little doses of optimism and refreshment. So thank you for bringing that to all of us and for giving that to us to end on. And I'm very excited for your new book that you're working on, Activating Veterinary Wellbeing and Resiliency. Is that
It's close enough. I think I think the title that I'm working with, it's bringing the how towards the what of the first book with some new concepts and language mixed in. But I've heard that a lot from folks, that we're getting more and more aware of concepts and language. What do we do with it? Individually, as teams, etc. Let's bring some strategies and actionable tools to the forefront. So that's what I'm up to.
very excited about that? Looking forward to seeing when that comes out. Well, thanks for sharing all of your wealth of knowledge and inspiration with us today. And it's really great talking to you. And I'm glad for everybody else to hear it.
Thanks so much, Emily. This was really a lot of fun.